Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our Actionar. Thank you so much for being here. We're just going to give it a minute before we start, but welcome to the Actionar Mining Out, Canadian Complicity in Mining Destruction. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Cynthia Flores, and I'll be hosting this webinar. I'm the digital organizer at Amazon Watch, and I work in collaboration with the Ecuador, Brazil, and Peru team. Today we have Gabby from the Brazil team, Kevin from the Peru team, and we're hosting this webinar in collaboration with Mining and Justice Solidarity Network. We have Rachel from Mining and Justice Solidarity Network, and we're just going to give it one more minute to allow folks to join, and then we can all introduce ourselves. All right. All right, again, so I'll reintroduce all of us. So thanks everyone for being here. We have 3 guests who will speak to you about mining in the Amazon, how communities in Ecuador, Brazil, and Canada are connected, and you'll hear directly from representatives of those affected communities. And I wanted to start off with some housekeeping. I wanted to let you all know that we're going to let each panelist speak, and then at the end we will have a Q&A, and we'll finish off with an Actionar. So if you do have any questions for these panelists, please feel free to add them to the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So we'll be able to answer those questions at the end of the webinar or of the Actionar, and feel free to add those questions throughout everyone's presentation. And the best way to participate is through a desktop. If you're able to change, of course, if you can't, that's fine. But if you're able to on a desktop, that would allow you to engage with some of the content that we'll be sharing a little bit easier. And then just so you know, if some of the questions that you ask during this webinar are not answered, we will be sure to send out an email with all of the answers to those questions. So please know that we will do our best to answer everyone's questions. And so I'd like to give the space for everyone to introduce themselves. Kevin, would you like to start?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Koenig. I direct our climate, energy, and extractive industry work at Amazon Watch. I'm based in Quito, Ecuador, though right now here in Toronto for the PDAC conference. Yeah, I've been with Amazon Watch for about 2 decades, working with frontline communities to stop rights abuses associated with oil, gas, and mining.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Gabriela Sarmé. I'm a Brazilian researcher specialized in mining conflicts. I'm also an activist for human rights and rights of nature. And currently, I'm the Brazil Campaigns Advisor. So I basically coordinate all Brazil-based campaigns, projects, and initiatives, and trying to implement grassroots and corporate strategies against industrial mining in the Amazon. So nice to be here with you all. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Small. I'm an organizer with the Mining and Justice Solidarity Network, or MISSIN. We're a Toronto-based grassroots activist group that has been fighting against the harmful practices of the Canadian mining industry in direct solidarity with frontline communities around the world who are impacted by these mines. We're based right here in Toronto, where in the Toronto Financial District, the mining industry is also based, and it's also stolen land, built on stolen Haudenosaunee and Mississauga land. So we're based here, but we work in solidarity with folks all over the world.
Great, thank you, everyone. So we wanted to gather everyone today to speak about mining in the Amazon and across Canada and Turtle Island and how Canadian policies are contributing to the destruction of these lands through mining. And so also it's very timely because there's currently a conference going on right now, a convention in Toronto called the Prospectors and Developers Association Canada Convention, and PDAC for short. And so I know that Kevin is there right now, but Rachel and Mining and Justice Solidarity Network have been working for years to disrupt PDAC. And so I was hoping, Rachel, can you start off by sharing what is PDAC and how is it relevant to the work that you all are doing?
Yes, PDAC started yesterday here in Toronto. It's the world's biggest mining convention. At least 30,000 people attend every year. There was maybe a bit of a dip a couple years ago through the pandemic, but it's I was there all day yesterday. I can tell you it's huge. There are thousands of booths representing hundreds of mining companies, as well as engineering firms, any types of contractors that the mining industry uses are represented. There are booths representing dozens of countries. Different countries sponsor different days. It's estimated that people come from at least 30 different countries around the world. I'm trying to sort of paint the picture here for you of how big a deal it is. It takes over downtown Toronto. Yeah, and there's a reason it happens here, right? It's not just during PDAC that Toronto is the center of global mining. Nearly between sort of 50% and 75% of the world's mining companies are listed as Canadian, depending on how you define that. As I said, that's hundreds of extractive companies, but then also the financial, the PR, the other companies that support extractive projects are also just based, usually within just a few blocks of PDAC all year round. So Toronto is the global hub of mining financing, and that's exactly why PDAC takes place here every year. Otherwise put, while Canadian mining operates in all corners of the world, about half of the global profits that come from all that extraction actually flow through Toronto's financial district. And an even larger percentage of Canadian mining companies trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So it's these relationships and these connections that kind of coalesce in this mega conference that happens here every year, where, of course, as I mentioned, there's at least 30,000 mining professionals in the room, and who, of course, is not in the room overwhelmingly are the communities around the world who face the direct impacts of the decisions that get made at PDAC and in Toronto throughout the year. Decisions that are discussed in the hundreds of panels and workshops that happen at PDAC, but also in the backroom discussions, also at the bars in the neighborhood. If you hang out around there this week, everybody's talking about mining, and a lot of what they're saying is not what they then repeat to communities where they pitch their mining projects. I'd love to dive right in and show a little bit about how the the Mining and Justice Solidarity Network, has responded to PDAC over many years. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see directly. So what I shared was a little bit of the official definition of PDAC. This is how MISSN describes PDAC. We've often called it the world's biggest corporate colonial supervillain convention. We greet it in various ways every year. Here you can see that sign a little bit better. I'm going to show you a video about that really highlights what these protests at PDAC can look like, and more importantly, who comes together and why we stand up to this convention. I'm just going to show you a 3-minute video.
We can't see your screen. Oh, there we go.
We're here outside the world's largest mining convention. Toronto has shown out by the hundreds to say no to the business as usual of this industry. We will not allow their ongoing colonization, land theft, violence, environmental destruction to continue. FEDAC itself estimates about 25,000 attendees are joining them this year from at least 130 countries. At least 30% of the attendees, they say, come from outside Canada. So this is truly a global conference. Toronto is the global capital of mining finance, and Canada in general is the global hub of mining. Over 2/3 of mining companies around the world are based here in Canada. So we're right here in the belly of the beast.
Their business as usual is a world where the rights of capital always take precedence over human rights.
We're here to disrupt as much as we can because there are Indigenous communities all over the world impacted by these companies. All of these corporations are connected to the larger infrastructure of resource extraction.
Extractive companies think they can hide in this convention center and literally give each other awards for corporate social responsibility, for sustainability. They are holding glitzy galas all this weekend and this week to literally celebrate each other's greenwashing and charitable efforts.
If you don't mine it, you don't have copper. If you don't have copper, you have nothing. Nothing in the city, nothing in this world runs. Don't you get it?
Oh, I get it. Don't you get it?
I have a 3-year-old child standing right there at this protest. I will not let this industry render this planet unlivable for their generation and for generations to come.
This industry is leading us directly down a path towards a planet that is literally unlivable.
We're all going to face consequences due to these mining industries being able to self-regulate and have the government's protection because it is enforcing a climate crisis on all of us. This is a genocidal act on the futures of all children.
Built on the removal of Indigenous people for resource extraction.
I'm a land defender from the Aamjiwnaang First Nation. I'm an Anishinaabe Kwe. Aamjiwnaang First Nation is located in Sarnia, Ontario, where Chemical Valley surrounds my community. I see refineries and flares. I grew up being exposed to chemicals on a daily basis. Speaking up for our health and environment is unfortunately what most Indigenous people across the world are having to do because of corporations being able to meet and to expand and grow and maintain a level of violence across the world thanks to Canada.
So that's a bit of a glimpse of what it's looked like in past years when we've confronted PDAC and why we've done it. And it's hard to catch all the signs that pass, but we have always had representatives from many countries around the world, many mining impacted communities, but also folks here on Turtle Island, right? Vanessa spoke from Aamjiwnaang First Nation just a few hours from Toronto, but one of the most polluted places in North America is their First Nation by the extractive projects that are happening here. I'm gonna show you a couple more pictures. We've also snuck into PDAC on other years. We have to mix it up, not let them always expect the same thing. Here we held a vigil for folks who had been killed resisting Canadian mining projects. I wanted to share this today because we're actually just a few days after the anniversary of Berta Cáceres's murder. And this memorial took place a few years ago, right after she had been murdered. And it was an incredibly powerful way, right in the center of the biggest space within PDAC, to force them to confront the death that their projects are connected to. We've done balloon lifts. I could probably find a better picture to share, but it said Hudbay Minerals corporate criminals, to force these messages to be stuck in their spaces where they couldn't get away from them. We confront mining company executives directly at their booths. We deliver documents on behalf of communities around the world. We've done many banner drops. This was us crashing Ecuador Day last year. And this was just yesterday. We snuck into PDAC, and it was hard to capture on film, but we had humongous, very, very long blue fabric swaths with fish painted on them as a way of disrupting the flow of PDAC by bringing back in the water. This year, all the communities that we spoke with, what they asked us to highlight at PDAC was the contamination of their waterways. And so we tried to bring some of that narrative into PDAC. There were multiple sort of swaths of fabric. Here we're blocking the escalators. That they could still go up, but the escalator going down was being blocked. And on the left side, it's a little hard to see, but we've surrounded the Ontario section of PDAC where they were promoting mining in the Ring of Fire, which is being strongly opposed by Indigenous groups in Northern Ontario. So just a little sort of sneak peek of some of what we've been doing in PDAC this year. There's also been sort of other sneaky actions. You couldn't visit a bathroom at PDAC yesterday without confronting these water is life. We have multiple editions highlighting different community struggles in all the bathrooms in the convention center, and all of downtown Toronto is also plastered with these posters right now highlighting the narratives that aren't being shared of PDAC. So around protection of water, but also we've got 10 different posters highlighting community resistance struggles and whose voices are not being represented right now at PDAC.
And all of that work is so amazing. That video was wonderful to watch. Thank you so much, Rachel. And why we're so excited to be collaborating with you all at Missin. And thank you for framing what PDAC is and what's been done as far as the activism in Toronto. And I wanted to pass it to my colleague, Kevin, who is on the Ecuador team and has worked with campaigning against a mining company called Solaris. And I'd like to share the mic with him to have him explain who Solaris is, the work that has been done for the campaign, and even the most recent, like today's launch, and that all of that explanation will then lead us into hearing a testimonial from some of the affected communities.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, so to start out a little bit about Solaris Resources, right? Solaris is a Canadian junior mining company who has a flagship project in Southeast Ecuador, in an area called the Cordillera del Condor, right? This is an incredible area of high biodiversity, endemic species, because it's in this transition zone between the Andes and the Amazon. It's also the traditional territory of the Shuar Indigenous Nation, a large group of them known as Shuar Arutam. It's their traditional territory, right? They've lived here for millennia. And it's their home, right? It's their market, it's their pharmacy, it's their hardware store, and it's filled with sacred sites, and it really is the physical and spiritual base of their culture, right? That they depend on for their daily survival. The Shuar Arutam, there are 47 different communities. They're about 12,000 people. But their territory is carved up into several different mining concessions. One of those belongs to Solaris. Solaris holds a concession for 10,000 hectares of Shuar Arutam territory. They are advancing exploration for a copper mine on Shuar Arutam territory without the consent or even consultation of Shuar Arutam. The Shuar Arutam, they go by their traditional government structure, Pueblo Shuar Arutam. The acronym is PESHA, how they refer to it and how we do as well. PESHA, they've repeatedly rejected mining plans for their territory, right? Time and time again. In their general assemblies, their traditional democratic decision-making processes. They've brought together all the communities and multiple times rejected this project. In fact, almost since the beginning of the project, when the deposits were first, quote unquote, discovered back in 2000, there has been resistance to this project. And so it hasn't really, basically gotten off the ground very much, right? But in 2019, that's when Solaris came in as a player after buying Lowell Mineral Resources and buying the project. They began a series of tactics to try to manufacture consent for the project, right? So they basically faced with the united opposition of the PESHA Federation. They said, okay, how can we, we're going to cherry pick some communities. We're going to, talk to the, two communities that, they consider would be directly affected. And basically they, through a whole series of different, community relations programs, et cetera, they work to subvert the traditional decision-making power of the Shuar Arutam and isolate these two communities. So, what does that do? Basically, it starts pitting community against community, family against family. And then you have the companies, and this is a model that this is other mining companies are using in Ecuador, but also we're seeing it all over the Amazon, and I think anywhere that this industry or the oil industry, the extractive industry in general, is using this, right? Because we've gotten to a place where the greenwashing, these companies know that they have to basically put some sort of ESG, environmental social governance standards and examples out there, and to be able to sort of justify community buy-in for the projects. And when they can't get it, they start to, there's a playbook, and they start to use these tactics and splinter the communities, splinter the organization. Shuar Arutam, they hold collective land title to this whole area, right? And so for a company like Solaris to hold up and say, hey, we have two communities that want this project after offering kind of, modern day trinkets and beads, they essentially, they try to manufacture consent from those communities and then hold that up at conferences like PDAC as support for their project. So what has happened, though, is that as Solaris started to do this, and basically you're setting a stage for conflict, right? Because the president of Shuar Arutam, Josefina Tunki, she's the first woman president of the Shuar Federation. She received death threats and intimidation. The lawyers working with her as well, faced intimidation for basically their effort to exert the right to say no. And interestingly enough, the Shwararutam are basically to the point where they've said, look, we don't even want to be, not only has our right to consent and consultation not been respected, but in fact, we've already decided we don't need to be consulted. We know that we don't want mining and we've said it and we want that to be respected, this right to say no. But as I mentioned before, these, the faced with that united opposition, and Solaris tried, working to erode the structure of Pesha and that decision-making, the threats began against Josefina and others. And I think it's important to mention that this is, these have real world consequences when you divide indigenous organizations like this, because what we saw happen last week in Ecuador, where an COFAN indigenous leader, a representative of CONAI, the National Indigenous Organization Confederation in Ecuador, he was murdered, assassinated out front of his home. And he had been leading a group of COFAN families and communities that had been rejecting oil extraction. But the state oil company had been using these kinds of tactics to try to divide and conquer them and basically create a scenario where you had some communities in favor, some against, and this kind of violence is starting to take place in Ecuador, and we're seeing it. Obviously, it's taking place in other countries as well. But it's something that's, it's a very disturbing trend that we're starting to see, is frontline defenders being targeted for their opposition to these projects. And so bringing it back to PDAC a little bit here, where, what we saw today, right? Ecuador Day, the whole morning, you had Ecuador's Minister of Energy present, along with 5 or 6 different mining companies, all promoting Ecuador as the next destination for mining extraction, right? And talking about how, basically the country was open for investment. They can fast track environmental permits. And that basically, for communities, communities want these projects. That's what they're touting and saying up here. But what's actually happening on the ground is something very different, right? You have communities that are rising up. The energy sector is facing massive resistance to their projects all over the country. So I'm going to stop there. That's a little bit of a snapshot of what we've been seeing, so we can hear a quick video and testimony from Josefina, the president of Shwararutam, when she was just recently in Geneva at the United Nations.
Great, so I'll share my screen and play that. And as Kevin is saying, the oil company, the mining companies are saying one thing, and then we have the president of one of these indigenous communities, Pesha, saying very explicitly, we don't want mining. So it's very clear that there's a lot of manipulation happening, and we would like to share her voice with you.
Soy Josefina Tonque, presidenta actual de Pueblo Shwararutam, que está ubicado al sur de la Amazonía del Ecuador, en la Cordillera del Cóndor. Las empresas canadienses están tratando de ingresar desde el año 2006, pero nosotros, Pueblo Shwararutam, hemos dicho de manera unánime no a la minería. Particularmente, tenemos un conflicto con la empresa Solaris Resource, porque ha ocasionado serios divisiones en nuestras comunidades. La empresa Solaris empezó a realizar las actividades mineras sin previa consulta, previo consentimiento en nuestras comunidades. La empresa Solaris ha violado nuestros derechos de autodeterminación y nos ha fraccionado la estructura organizativa, porque existe bastante división y conflictos entre organizaciones y también entre las familias y comunidades. Por defender y proteger y respetar los derechos de mi organización, yo estoy amenazada por la empresa y estoy perseguida en la actualidad y tengo amenazas. El pueblo Shuar Aruta pide y clamamos al mundo que las empresas se retiren de manera inmediata todas las minerías. Queremos vivir libre de contaminación en nuestras tierras.
There we are. So, of course, part of the reason why we're here is to share that truth, because clearly the communities have openly, explicitly, and very loudly said no to mining, and yet there are these conferences being held where the greenwashing is just so prevalent, and the corruption just is totally greenwashed. And that's why we also want to share these same testimonials from communities in Brazil. So I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague Gabi.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks everyone that just presented before me. It was great hearing everything, especially from Rachel. Like the video you shared just struck me very strongly. And it's very good to be collaborating with you guys. And I think that just before, like specifically talking about the two mining companies I'm going to talk about, the Belo-Sun and Equinox Gold, both of them are Canadian. Both of them are gold mining companies operating in the Brazilian Amazon. But something Amazon Watch has been identifying, and not only us, but many other organizations worldwide, Mining Justice Solidarity Network, it's one of them, is that there is a pattern of Canadian companies violating rights overseas and being complicity in environmental destruction abroad, right? So what Kevin just shared about Solaris Resources with the complete no respect for the right to say no, systematic violations to community rights to self-determination caused by the complete disregard of all adequate processes of free, prior, and informed consent and consultation. All of these processes, they are happening as mere notifications for local communities. So they are not actually consulted. They are just notified. And as we see in Ecuador, this is happening either based on notification or based on the fragmentation of communities, either offering money or value materials or some empty promises of development for people who are constantly struggling for their own lives, for their own survival, right? So it's very important for us to take a step back and never put a judgment on these people when they are living such difficult situations, because the reality now in these areas, specifically where Belo-Sun and Equinox Gold are located, are very similar, but at the same time, each company has been replicated this pattern based on the ways they are managing to enter the political connections in their own territories. So it's very important for us as well to hold these countries accountable, Brazil and Ecuador governments accountable, because they are being complicity when opening the way for Canadian mining companies to operate in their countries and violate people's rights, right? So first, here we're comparing, I want to try to bring a comparison between Belo-Sun and Equinox Gold, because Equinox Gold is a gigantic mining company operating in Maranhão, in the legal Amazon part of the state of Maranhão in Brazil. And they have been operating since 2007. They arrived in the area in 2007, and today it is one of the 5 largest gold mines in Brazil. And on the other hand, Belo-Sun is a junior mining company that haven't started their operations. They have their license suspended, but they arrived in the region in 2010. So 3 years after Equinox arrived in Maranhão, Belo-Sun arrived in Pará, different states in the Brazilian Amazon, but very similar time frame that they arrived, right? But the issue was that what happened with Belo-Sun when they arrived there is that there was already another mega development project happening in the Volta Grande do Xingu. But at the same time, Belo Sun was selling their project, the mining project, to be considered the largest open pit gold mine in the Brazilian history. So they basically wanted to take Equinox Gold space and other gold mining company space to be considered as the largest open pit gold mine. And based on that, they tried to receive a lot of investments, right? But the thing is that, as I said, there was another huge mega development project that started in the Volta Grande. There was the Belo Monte Dam. And this dam had already violated a lot of the rights of the communities. And the Xingu River, that it was directly affected by the hydroelectric dam, is already have a reduced flow because of the dam. So basically, we have to stop Belo Sun before their operations are implemented, because the Volta Grande region, that is a region known for the biodiversity that it has there, and for the climate balance that this region is responsible for taking in the whole Amazon rainforest. So as the Xingu River is already affected by a hydroelectric dam, having the largest open pit gold mine in Brazil located right next to it, and this would be less than 10 kilometers away, this could literally mean the death of the Xingu River and the ecocide of a region that is completely vital for life on Earth. So we're talking about a huge gold mine project that we must take a preventative approach, because we don't want it to start to be developed and reaching up to what we have today with Equinox Gold, that it's years and years of a project that Equinox Gold have been operating for 16 years, and no benefit whatsoever have arrived to communities, right? So I'll just try to give a resume about Belo Sun. So it started in 2010, and for 13 years, it has been threatening the livelihoods of indigenous peoples and local communities there in the Xingu region. Communities have been advocating the right to say no. They are denouncing Canada's complicity with rights violation. And we're trying to expose Belo Sun's failure to uphold communities' right to self-determination, right? The issue is that Belo Sun mining interests, so these mining companies that haven't started yet their installation, their mining interests cover an area in the Amazon that is more than twice the size of the New York City. So we're talking about a gigantic gold mine in the middle of the Amazon. But at the same time, these mining companies' project documents do not disclose the full extent of risks that are posed by this project. And these mining companies continue to mislead investors and also Canadian society about the gravity of this this mining project, which environmental license, by the way, is suspended since 2017. And the reason why it has been suspended is exactly because of the lack of respect to consultation and consent processes of local communities. Not only indigenous communities, important to say, but also riverine communities that have been completely disregarded when the mining company arrived there. So right now, the project status is that they only have, in Brazil, we have the need to have 3 different types of licenses before the operation start. And they only got the first one, but now the authority over the licensing process, it's also being reviewed because of the size of the project. So it's a huge project. So it shouldn't fall under the state jurisdiction, but under federal jurisdiction. And and that's good for us that are trying to resist against this mining project, exactly because if the jurisdiction around the environmental licensing processes change, the license that Belo Sun got is considered null and void. Therefore, they have to start the licensing process all over again, now with a different government taking the lead of Brazil, right? So I think that's a good summary on where we are at with Belo Sun. We are taking a preventative approach. We are having international advocacy strategies, national advocacy strategies as well to fight the expand of this junior mining company in the Amazon, together with our allies on the ground. But the thing is that right now we want to connect connect the dangers of mining even more closely to what Mining Justice Solidarity Network has been emphasizing, that is the threats to climate emergency. We have to hold mining industry accountable for that, right? So last but not least, I just want to, before sharing the video of affected communities, communities affected by Equinox Gold, it's important to say that Equinox Gold is known for the violation of the rights to water. And they have caused several damages to population's health, to the region's water bodies with a lot of contamination, and also for the city's well-being, mostly because in March 2021, a dam break flooded with 10 million cubic meters of mud with toxic waste, contaminated the largest water reservoir in the region that supplied the entire district of Arizona. So around 4,000 people have been affected, and they remain without access to water for months. And until today, almost 2 years later, communities remain with deeply compromised access to water due to the poor quality of it that is still contaminated, which has been proven by recent studies as well. So we have a lot of things to share, but I think that the best thing would be to share the testimonies of the affected people. And these two frontline community leaders that we are gonna talk right now, they have been arrested when they were protesting for the right to water. That's super important to highlight. And also in October 2022, there was the case, this specific case of them being taken to prison was taken to court, and Equinox Gold refused to reach a settlement, and they chose to criminalize these people. So they literally said that besides charging a fine to these people, these frontline communities, they asked the court, and I'm quoting them, to prevent the protests with all necessary measures, including the use of police force. So we also have to highlight the connections between not only the mining industry with the climate emergency, but also with systematic violence. And I'll give it the floor to our frontline communities now.
Great, I'll share this video. I'll share my screen in 1 second, but I did want to also highlight the importance of all of you being here, because this company that we're about to share a video testimonial about, like the experiences of communities in the area, they are at PDAC right now. So they're at PDAC promoting mineral exploration, and with the truth being that people are really being negatively affected, which is why we asked you all to be here, so that you can help us disrupt PDAC and like really expose these truths. So in the Actionar, which we'll do in another moment, we'll ask you to share these videos with prepared content, so that investors and everyone involved in PDAC can really see the truth about what's happening on the ground and not believe the greenwashing that's happening in the convention center. So 1 moment, I'll just share this video with you all.
Meu nome é Maria Valdiene, tenho 31 anos. Meu nome é Maria Aldineia, tenho 38 anos. Somos irmãs e moramos em Arizona, município de Godofredo Viana. Há exatamente 1 ano e 11 meses aconteceu um rompimento da barragem Equinox Gold, e qual deixou 1.500 famílias sem água potável e sem acesso a outro distrito. Há 1 mês desse rompimento dessa barragem, fizemos uma manifestação pacífica, onde juntamente eu e minha irmã fomos presa, onde fomos torturadas psicologicamente, como se fôssemos bandidas, e a gente estava lutando por uma justa causa, pacificamente, por água potável no nosso lugar, onde exatamente há 1 ano e 11 meses tínhamos água potável em nossas torneiras, tínhamos acesso a outro distrito, e ficamos até hoje, há exatamente 1 ano e 11 meses, sem nenhum resultado, sem nenhuma resposta.
Great, and I think we have another moment. So if Gabby would like, we can share the testimonial from, sounds good. We'll share the testimonial from Bel Juruna, whose community has been affected by Belo Sun. So remember, initially we were talking about Equinox Gold that was responsible for a dam break that affected these women's communities. And as they mentioned to you, their access to water. And now we'll share you a testimonial from Bel Juruna, who is in the perimeter of the potential Belo Sun open pit gold mine. So I'll share this right now. Let's see.
Oi, sou Bel Juruna, sou da aldeia Muratu, a terra indígena Paxamba. Nossa localidade aqui se dá o nome de trecho de vazão reduzida devido ao empreendimento de Belo Monte, né? Um empreendimento de energia, né? E então, a nossa localidade, né? Todo esse trecho aqui da Volta Grande, as nossas águas, nível diminuiu drasticamente, né? Controlado por comportas, devido eles levar, né, desviar toda a água para gerar energia, né? Então, a gente está nessa localidade. Nós somos povo Juruna, Iujá, né? Nós se considera dono do rio Xingu. E aí a nossa vida, a nossa cultura foi afetada diretamente por esse empreendimento e agora, então, está mais ameaçada devido ao empreendimento, né, da mineradora Belo Sun, né, do Canadá, que está querendo se instalar aqui na mesma região. Nós estamos sendo afetados, né, não só a nossa segurança de vida, mas a nossa permanência nessa localidade, porque não tem condições de 2 empreendimentos desse tamanho se instalar na mesma região. E nós estamos ameaçados, né, nossa segurança aqui, a nossa permanência devido a esse empreendimento, que a gente acredita que a mineradora é pior do que a hidrelétrica, né, porque a gente viu o que aconteceu em Mariana, né? Foi um desastre muito grande, muitas vidas perdidas, né? E até hoje a gente fica tentando imaginar como foi difícil, né? Para todas as pessoas que ali residiram. Então, Belo Monte já secou o rio, né? E agora Belo Sun quer explorar ouro, né? E aí a gente fica muito inseguro, né? Nossa permanência aqui está ameaçada. Então, não me refiro só à vida de nós, povos indígenas, mas de todas as pessoas que aqui residem, porque não somos só nós, né? Aqui na terra indígena Paxamba tem outras comunidades indígenas, e todo ao longo do trecho aqui da Volta Grande existe pescadores, existe pessoas ribeirinhas que moram, né, na margem do rio, nas ilhas.
Great. Well, give me 1 second. I lost you all here. All right. Well, we've heard these very terrible experiences of the communities that both Gabi and Kevin are working with. And we wanted to take this opportunity. I've seen that a few of you all have dropped some questions into the Q&A section. There's been so much information shared. So we'll hop into that part of our Actionar so that we can get some answers. And the way that this will work is, I mean, feel free to keep adding if something comes up even after this Q&A session. And as I mentioned earlier, that we'll be sure to answer all the questions in an email. But if whoever of our panelists would like to answer, just raise your hand and we can work that way. So we'll start off with Julie Beer's question, which is the new president of Brazil opposed to this huge gold mining operation? So who would like to answer?
Yeah, I can take this one, but everyone feel free to jump. The issues that we are now living a very, very polarized moment in Brazil. So it has been quite sensitive to take a stand in these cases, specifically when it comes to industry, like not only mining industry, but also the agribusiness industry, because there is a lot of relation between one sector to another. And for those that doesn't know Brazilian politics, Bolsonaro has had a lot of support from the agribusiness sector, and also from the mining sector, because he was prospecting to open indigenous lands to mining, which is forbidden by Brazilian constitution. So at first, what Lula took a very strong position against illegal mining in indigenous lands. But at the same time, it's not new. And I told you all about it, right? Belo Sun arrived in 2010 and Equinox arrived in 2007 and started its operation a bit later. Both of them were during Lula administration. So that's something we definitely need to pressure the new Brazilian president about it, because times have changed. We're facing a huge climate emergency, and Brazil can no longer, and that's a super important point, can no longer see Canada as an inspiration for mining policies. So Brazil is looking at Canada's policy and regulations around mining. Canadian ambassadors and from also other countries are lobbying in the Brazilian Congress to pass on very loose legislation around mining. And here there is a news about that shows how they have been lobbying about that. So definitely we need to pressure the new Brazilian president, but he haven't said anything publicly around these projects yet.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? If not, we can move on to another question. Great. And I do see that Rachel has been answering some of the questions in the chat, but I thought we could share those out loud to make sure that if anyone else had that same question, it gets answered as well. So one of the answered questions is, are the Canadian mining companies so aggressive because their revenues are so important to the Canadian economy? And Rachel answered, often their aggression comes from wanting to move very fast to make the huge profits off of spikes in gold prices or other metals and minerals, and to avoid any obstacles to their mining projects from local communities and court systems. Mining and other extractive industries do also make up a sizable portion of the Canadian economy. So thank you, Rachel, for answering that. And then we have, I do need to know how to respond to students who ask how do we get the critical minerals required for today's digital world, the PCs, cell phones we are using today for this webinar, the high-speed internet, etc. I usually do not know how to respond. I have to leave now. So this is a complex question. A great place to start is with this Mining Watch report. And
I
so
can give like the one sentence summary of what I would say, just for people aren't going to read the report right now, but I do recommend reading it. I mean, this is a really complex question and it comes up all the time in mining resistance, like, but we need metals. What are we going to do? And I think it's coming up, especially now, thinking through a lot of the solutions to climate change, which get pushed forward, are ideas of electrical cars or things that are going to require certain types of critical minerals. I would say, if I had to give a really short answer, it's not an either or. It's not, oh, we have no minerals or metals, or we do nothing. We do need to reduce the demand for mined metals and minerals. We don't need every person to have an electric car. We need public transit. We need a lot of these solutions we already know about to reduce the demand. We need to change the ways we're sourcing these minerals. There's not only one way to mine. There are many ways to mine that do not involve destroying ecosystems, contaminating waterways, creating sacrifice zones. One huge way that we need to be mining is mining our own waste, different versions of recycling. A lot of what we need has already been taken out of the ground. We don't need to keep taking it out of the ground. We just need to be reusing it. When we're talking about gold mining, it's not overwhelmingly being used for the examples the mining industry says. They always talk about how it's used in healthcare, even in jewelry. Most of it is being made into bars and put back in the underground underneath banks. Like we don't need to be destroying the environment to be doing things like that. And then, of course, we need to just change the entire way that the mining industry operates, like major overhaul of accountability, of laws. Then we could talk about maybe creating versions of mining that actually support clean energy, that actually support a climate transition. But right now, mining is responsible for 1/4 of climate emissions around the world. Mining right now is the problem. It's not the solution.
if I can just quickly add to that, I think that it's very important for us to also hold these technologies company accountable, because they are producing waste. They are producing cell phones and computers that in a few years doesn't work any longer. And instead of us as consumers pressure them so that these electronics that are super expensive can last longer, we're just buying new ones and putting the blame on how we need to mine more things to have more phones. That's not exactly the way we could go, right? We have other alternatives. And that's why this webinar, this Actionar is important, because we have actions and we need to take them seriously.
Great. Thank you so much for these questions. I do want to take account the time right now. So we have some minutes left in this Actionar. So we will be answering the rest of these questions. And I do think that there is a really deep conversation that needs to happen with this. So we would love to send you an email with follow-up. And there will, of course, because this is an ongoing campaign for both MISN and Amazon Watch, we'll definitely have other opportunities for you all to connect. So we really hope that you do continue. But so that we can respect everyone's time, I would love to move on to the portion of the Actionar. And so I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing a couple actions for you all to take right now, because as we said, it's really important that we disrupt PDAC. We disrupt these greenwashing narratives of, mining being the solution to climate change. And as we are talking about here, there's so many things that there's so many narratives that need to be disrupted. And so with your effort here today, we're hoping to get on Twitter and get on social media and do this disrupting amongst all of us. So the first and second action that we would like you all to take are related to petitions that Amazon Watch and MISN have organized. And so I'll start off with the mining out of the Amazon petition, which is a way to make sure that you all are connected to this campaign work. And if there's another follow-up event that we'll have you, we'll definitely invite you. And so the second action, I'm going to share the link right now. Give me 1 second. But the second action, if Rachel, if you can share just a minute of what this action is, and I'll share the link to the petitions and Actionar right now.
Absolutely. I mean, we could share campaigns with many communities, but what I specifically wanted to highlight today is the struggle in Grassy Narrows First Nation. In the middle of the coldest part of winter in 2002, Grassy Narrows youth laid down in the road in front of logging trucks, and that started the longest running blockade in Canadian history. Over 20 years now, they've been blockading roads. They have kicked out the world's largest newsprint company, so they've stopped all logging on their territories. But they're still dealing with mercury poisoning that has affected all of their health over many decades of logging that was happening before they blockaded it. And now Ontario is breaking all of its own rules and has granted 8 mining permits on Grassy Narrows territory. They haven't consulted the community. They haven't notified them about the permits. It's completely against all Canadian laws, let alone international laws. And so we need to stand in solidarity with them and say that this is not acceptable. It's not acceptable anywhere, but especially not an Indigenous territory that is still suffering mercury poisoning and that has resisted this type of extractivism for decades.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So I wanted to point out that I added into the chat the link to our social kit. So it is socialpresskit.com/mining out. It's also in the chat. If you can click on it and join us onto this kit. And on this social press kit, we have an explanation, a description of what we're all talking about here today, the intent of the Actionar, some hashtags that we'll be using, and the instructions for the Actionar. So the first action is to sign the mining out of the Amazon action petition. If you click on the link, it'll take you to that page where you can then sign up for the petition, where we'll be sharing more content, more campaign next steps with you. And then we have the petition that Rachel just talked about right now as action 2, where you can also sign to tell Ontario to withdraw all mining and logging from Grassy Narrows territory. And then we have action 3, which is a hashtag takeover. So we'd like to send your attention here to action 3, where we can scroll down. And the nice thing about this share kit is you can press post a timeline, and it'll give you very clear instructions on how to share that on your social media. And you could also do the same thing for the tweets. So what we're asking you here today is if you can, here we are. I'm actually going to share my screen. That makes more sense. So here we are at the social press kit. And these are the testimonials that you just heard. And in here we explain, so you'll be sharing this on your social medias and your family and friends will be seeing this content and learning about what is PDAC and why we need to disrupt it. So we have a testimonial of Beljuruna giving the experience that she has in her community and how PDAC is trying to greenwash at the moment in Toronto in this conference. And so what we want to do is share this and disrupt PDAC. We have these hashtags disrupt PDAC, mining out of the Amazon. And so if you can take a moment right now to send out that tweet with these testimonials to get this message across all of our socials. And I know that there's also another Twitter storm happening today with our partners at Mining Watch as well. So your efforts plus the efforts of Mining Watch and hundreds of other people who are also doing this is going to make sure that they can hear us and hear specifically the testimonials of our partners in the Amazon. And it's deciding not to post right now, but I'm sure you all will have more luck. I have a lot of things running on my page right now. So then that is action 3 is the hashtag takeover. We have Amazon Watch's posts right here with the testimonials. And then we also have Mining and Justice Solidarity Network posts right here as well. So feel free to tweet any of these tweets right now. And then also, of course, you can come back to this link later in the day and share those tweets. And then the last action that we have is that you invite your friends and family to share these as well. So action 4 is a share to Twitter to invite your friends and family to also share that. So that the more people we get to hear this message, the better. And with that, I really want to thank you all for being here. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. Thank you all so much for being here. And we will be sending out an email very soon with the questions that you all have asked. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of those, but we definitely will. The recording of this webinar, if you want to go back and listen to any of the testimonials again, and then you'll also have access to them here on this social press kit. So please feel free throughout the day, throughout the week, anytime. The conference will be going on until, I believe, Wednesday. And so if we're sharing even every day, if you wanted to do it, that would be amazing. Every day you go on there and share the same tweets even, just to make sure that investors and everyone who is believing this narrative can hear the truth about what's happening in the Amazon and across North and South America. So again, thank you so much. And I'll leave it to you all to also say goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.